Alrighty, we're here today with a little bit of fun content. Now, this is just my opinion, though I do have my reasons for my own opinion. You can probably find units you think are worse than these, but these are out of all of Total Warhammer 3 units, not heroes or lords. Units are a little more fun to talk about, and heroes and lords usually dominate the conversation. These are the top 5 units that need buffs, they need help. Number 1 is the Plague Toads of Nurgle, also Pox Riders of Nurgle, but they're roughly the same unit. This was a tough one. I didn't want Nurgle to dominate the whole list. Nurglings also suck pretty bad. Rotflies also suck quite bad. But the Plague Toads of Nurgle, 20 seconds. Remember 20 seconds. Plague Toads of Nurgle are going to take this spot out of the 3. Had to talk about them. So, these lads are 600 gold. They only have 59 speed, making them rather slow for cavalry / war beast type units. They're very slow. They do have poison, magic attacks, and anti-infantry. That's great, but they don't have good armor-piercing values. They have the physical resist of most demons and Cloud of Flies to give them better melee defense, but that just gives them okay melee defense, which they got an entire passive for. That is it. That is all this unit has for being 600 gold. Now, its job is to kill infantry, probably, or archers, probably. Does it do either of those jobs quickly? No. And why is, you can see it's scattering out people. So it charged these Cossars quite a while ago, and so far the damage value trade is about even. Now, one thing I will give Plague Toads as a positive, the only positive I'll give them, is they usually take very little damage when fighting low-tier infantry because of how often they just knock these guys around. It's hard for the infantry to really get up and get any shots off. Now, meanwhile, what sucks for Plague Toads is they're probably going to be getting shot by cheap archers this entire time, or there's going to be other infantry coming in or swarming in. There might be cavalry, which they lose fights against every heavy cav in the game, and even some light cav, or they don't do very well there. But any form of arrows, skirmish cav, basic arrows will kill these guys, and they have a problem with, killing anything. Remember how I said 20 seconds? Yeah, subtract 20, and this is how long it's going to take them to kill a basic Cossar. I mean, yeah, it's an armored Cossar, but I just meant like a basic, infantry unit. We're going on 3 minutes. They're still fighting. Part of the thing that makes them tanky-ish in melee combat. Now, this unit is not very tanky. If its leadership dips below the crumbling point, it just instantly dies. But the only thing that makes them kind of tanky is the knockdown. Another thing that the knockdown does is spreads the infantry the fuck out, so it's impossible for them to really take anything out or finish their task. So they're slow, they're not that cheap, they're not that tanky, they don't deal that much damage, they really don't have too much of a place. Now, Nurgle doesn't have a ton of good cavalry, so sometimes you might see these units, but that doesn't mean that they're going to perform particularly great. We're still going on 3 minutes and 20 seconds, and the Cossar's passive finally popped, so that means the unit would have routed. It only took about 4 minutes. Huzzah. Then they try to help out with Boris Ursus, but he is going to fight them back. Plague Toads. Or Rotflies or Nurglings, but I picked Plague Toads. Is taking our number 5 spot. The least useless. All right, number 4 spot. Still, I think, slightly more useless than the Plague Toads. The Plague Toads at least have something they can kind of do. But the Savage Orc Boar Boy Biggins. This was a hard choice between the Savage Orc variant or the Savage Orc Boar Boys or the Savage Orc Boar Boy Biggins, but I thought I'd go with the Boar Boy Biggins. They have a pretty measly 25% physical resistance. In Game 3, there's a lot of units from Game 2 and 1 that got magic damage, and there are a lot of units in Game 3 that have magic damage, so this physical resist matters less and less each day. Their Frenzy gives them ITP. They don't actually normally have ITP. They have armor-piercing anti-large, which would usually make them good, but 35 armor, 16 melee defense, and a whopping cost of 1,000 gold tends to make Savage Orc Boar Boy Biggins not worth their cost at all, and they are still a greenskin unit, so they have relatively low leadership. They will often trade down into cavalry fights, but even if they win a cavalry fight, they'll come out of it quite damaged with their only 16 melee defense and 35 armor. Again, that makes it really hard for them. Also, they are unshielded, meaning basic small arms fire with low armor and no shields will do a lot of damage to these guys, and they cannot kill infantry to save their life. With only 28 melee attack, they heavily rely on 5 bonus versus large. Wow, I didn't even factor that in when talking about this. All right, so even their melee attack is pretty low. They rely on Frenzy to get a little bit of melee attack in, but still. This unit, for 1,000 gold, should be relatively elite, and it is only decent at its exact purpose, armored large cav, and it's terrible against infantry or when getting shot by basic archers. All right. Number 3 on the list, Crocodores, everyone's favorite, but somehow still terrible monstrous infantry unit for the Lizardmen. Crocodores are just trash. At this point on the list, we are getting to the just trash. It's somehow 2 units managed to be worse than this is surprising. It was a hard choice for the top 3, but Crocodores are going to take the 3rd spot. Armor-piercing anti-infantry with 26 melee stats. Primal Instincts will help out if your hit points are less than 50%. Paltry 15% missile resist, cause fear. All that is sounding good so far. 100 armor on these bad boys, but these Crocodores are 1,000 gold. With only 22 charge bonus, they won't even get that good charge off. So, we have 1,000 gold of Crocodore versus 1,000 gold of infantry. They should be good here. It's armored infantry. They have a bonus versus infantry of 20. And they are going to plow in. Tic-Tac-Toe is going to distract the Mounted Chieftain so he doesn't interfere with the fight. But while we watch this proceed, Crocodores will lose to most spear units or elite spear units. They'll lose to great weapon units because of their 100 armor. They will do okay into cavalry, but with 46 speed, they have a hard time catching cavalry on their terms. Usually cavalry will rear charge them or something. They are, like most monstrous infantry, susceptible to small arms fire, cannon fire, that kind of thing. So they have all the weaknesses of normal monstrous infantry with very little of the strengths, a high cost, and slow speeds, which can be problematic for them. And even versus non-armor-piercing, non-anti-large, not basic, I guess Marauder Champions are basic, they're elite, but like still, it's 1,000 gold versus 1,000 gold, and you'd think that these guys would do better. They are not doing so hot. They're trading about even health-wise. And eventually, they do get ground down by the very front line they were fighting. Crocodores in general aren't good. Not really. Boop, goodbye. Now, some people out there might be like, well, Crocodores normally have skink support versus Marauder Champions. Yeah, I was just proving a point, right? Like, sure, you could throw 300 more gold at this fight, and then they would probably win it. But there's also usually archers shooting at the Crocodores. There's also usually cannons. There's cav running around. Like, there's a lot going on. So Crocodores in general, just not very good at what they need to do. They're also low melee stats, plus no bonus versus large, means if they surround a big unit like a Terracotta Sentinel, they'll just straight up lose. So they can't do anything besides fight infantry, and even against fighting infantry, they're eh. So that's the number 3 spot, Crocodores. Alright, spots 2 and 1. If I thought the Crocodore was hard, it ended up in 3rd because 2 and 1 are definitely the most useless units in the entire game. The Pump Wagon is going to take spot number 2. Start racking your brain for what unit could I possibly think is worse than the Snotling Pump Wagon. At 500 gold, these guys are not cheap. Now, to be fair, they aren't exactly expensive, but they are not cheap. When I clicked on them, both of the Spearmen and Swordsmen of the Empire, Spearmen and Swordsmen, were labeled as dangerous. They had red triangles over their head. That is how little the game believes in the Snotling Pump Wagons. You're going to charge some Spearmen and some Swordsmen. Now, Spearmen do have charge defense and charge reflection, which won't make it tough, but even on the Swordsmen who have no such thing, the charge value is very limited, and then they will start taking a lot of damage, to be fair, from the General of Empire. Now, these guys failed their charge on the Spearmen because of the charge reflection, and now they can't even push through the Spearmen, and they are going to just straight up die right there, right now. The other pump wagons can escape from the Swordsmen, but boom, the Snotling Pump Wagon has already routed, and the Spearman has already paid for itself. Hooray. The Pump Wagon that hasn't died, for the sake of our example, is going to continue fighting Swordsmen for a little bit, but even trying to cycle charge, even without the General of the Empire and trying to cycle charge, they're taking more damage than it's worth, and they are getting caught up on just a few Swordsman models. They really can't get out of there. And they do end up getting their asses kicked by basic infantry. So the only thing Snotling Pump Wagons are good for is disrupting archers. Not even killing archers, they're just good for disrupting archers. Which, I mean, Spider Riders and Wolf Riders can do that, and they can do more damage, and they're cheaper, and they're faster, and they're better. So why not just take them? Snotling Pump Wagons, pretty useless. But there is one worse. And I'm going to take a lot of heat for it. All right. Here it is. The worst unit, in my opinion, the one in the most need of buffs in Warhammer 3, is the Feral Mammoth. Now, all of the Mammoth variants are struggling a little bit, but the Feral Mammoth is uniquely terrible. 30 armor, to be fair, a giant health pool, but 30 armor plus the ability to rampage, and pitiful melee stats with 30 melee attack, 28 melee defense, makes this unit worthless. I think I mentioned its price point, but in case I did not, it is 1,600 gold for this gigantic piece of shit. Now that is, that's a lot of gold. That's a lot of gold. Deathmaster Stitch is that much money, right? Deathmaster Snitch is that much money. These archers, 350 gold, and these Spearman Shields, 350 gold, is 700 total gold, and they are going to dominate this 1,600 gold monstrosity. It does not do a lot of damage to infantry, even on the charge. It does pitiful damage there. It's not that great at pushing through. It can be a decent disruption piece, but for 1,600 gold, you're hoping for a lot more. The Lizardmen can take 2 Feral Bastiladons for 1,300 gold. So they could take 2 Feral Bastiladons and a Skink for the price of this Feral Mammoth. Norska itself could take, what is it? A Skinwolf's 950, and then you have 750 left. You could take a Skinwolf and a Berserker instead of this gigantic piece of garbage. If it even takes any damage at all, it will rampage. You lose control of a 1,600 gold piece that you cannot heal in any way, shape, or form. That is weak to basic archers and basic spearmen, but it's also weak to halberds. It's also weak to handgunners because it's so tall. It's gigantic. It's easy to shoot. It is slow. It does not do a lot of damage. It is expensive. Did I mention it's expensive? The Feral Mammoth is by far the worst unit in this game. I know it was close between this and the Snotling Pump Wagons, because the Snotling Pump Wagons are equally disappointing in-game. The only reason I say the Feral Mammoth was by far the easiest after I really sat down and thought about it is the 1,600 gold price. You can get a giant for 1,400 gold that is just better at everything the Mammoth thinks it can do, and it's 200 gold cheaper. Feral Mammoths are truly a pathetic excuse for a unit. That has been this list. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully if you are going to comment on something you think is more useless than anything in this this video, that's fine. Just be respectful about it. Don't get all pissy, because that's never fun, and I usually just downvote those comments or flame you, and that's no fun for anybody. So, Feral Mammoth sucks dick. Goodbye. Roar. Subscribe, yes, yes.